Hey man, I feel like the NFC East is in a unique position this year because they can really be the best division or the worst division. Now, hear me out when I say best division. The Commanders, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Cowboys all have a chance to be very good this year. The Commanders still got Jaden Daniels. They can go on a run. The Giants have Jackson Dart. And they have a nice head coach now. You can like John Harbaugh or hate John Harbaugh. He's a decent coach. It's better than what they had for years. So he can make a run for it. Still got the Eagles and the Cowboys in prime position to make a run for it. It can go really bad or really really good. It depends how it goes.
The Philadelphia Eagles won the NFC East in 2025 with an 11-6 record, and for the first time since 2003 and 2004, the NFC East had a repeat division winner. Unfortunately, the Bird season ended in the wild card round of the playoffs with a 23-19 loss to the 49ers, and it ended what was a very up and down season for the reigning champions. And up and down is a good way to describe how the 2025 season played out for the NFC East. While the New York Giants finished the year 4-13 and fired former head coach Brian Daboll after a 2-8 start, they still had a few moments throughout the year as they defeated the Eagles 34-17 on Thursday Night Football in Week 6, and Jackson Dart had 24 total touchdowns as a rookie. The Commanders even started out 2-1 through 3 games before things went sour, and the Cowboys had a very good offense that looks to be good again in 2026.
Definitely.
Each team had a relatively good draft and free agency, as the Giants had 2 top 10 draft picks, and the Cowboys had 2 first-round picks themselves too. All of this to say, the NFC East is going to be one of the best and most fun divisions to watch in 2026.
Definitely.
You can make a legitimate case as to why each team in this division could go to the playoffs this year. And there is a lot to break down in today's video, and if you could like...
And you know what's best about the NFC? The NFC is one of the only divisions that has hate like the NFC North has it. Like the Cowboys and the Eagles hate each other. I feel like that's comparable to the Bears and the Packers. Personally, there's not too many rivalries I can compare to that. I feel like the Bears, the Packers, Cowboys, and Eagles. Honorable mention Cowboys and 49ers, by the way. Then we're also going to have the Steelers versus the Ravens slugfest every time. Steelers versus the Ravens is a nasty work. Then I also want to say, as of recent, I can't really say that. I do want to say the Seahawks versus, the 49ers versus the Rams. Well, Seahawks versus the 49ers. One of those. That's actually also in there.
Before we start, a football will appear when you do and would be very much appreciated. Today's video by breaking down the Washington Commanders. The Commanders had a long 2025 season, as outside of the first 3 weeks in which they started out with a 2-1 record and had 400 yards in each of those wins, they would go just 3-12 the rest of the way and just 2-10 after a Week 5 win over the Chargers. The defense was horrible as they finished 27th in points allowed and were dead last in yards allowed as they allowed over 6,500 yards in 2025 and forced just 10 turnovers in 17 games.
Who was on our defense?
Opposing quarterbacks threw 33 touchdowns to 8 interceptions against the Commanders last year, and why I think Washington can bounce back in 2026 is pretty clear. They improved the roster this offseason, pretty significantly I would add, and you would also like to think injuries are going to work more in their favor this year than they did last.
You hope so.
There is an obligatory thing we have to mention here. If Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin miss a combined 17 games in 2026, like they unfortunately did last year, then we're talking about a completely different season. And it would be much of the same if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase missed a combined 17 games for the Bengals. Those are season-altering injuries. So for the sake of the outlook for the Commanders in this video, we kind of have to assume they're going to be healthier this year. And for how underwhelming their offense was last year, I'm excited to see David Blau and the offense he uses in Washington. David Blau has said that he is building the playbook from the studs to match the skill sets of players within the Commanders' offense, and I know that may sound obvious, but what this means is he is not saying they have to run his offense or get out of his way.
That is perfect, and I feel like more offensive coordinators should adopt that because a lot of offensive coordinators are more so, you're going to adapt to my philosophy. If I don't like you, we're going to trade you. They don't really adapt to what they have already. And that goes, like, look at what Chip Kelly did when he got to the Eagles. And by the way, why the fuck would the Raiders hire Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator last year? That was stupid. But the Eagles, they got there. They had Mike Vick. They had Deshaun Jackson. They had Shady, LaShawn McCoy. Traded all of them. Got rid of all of them. For what? Because he wanted to do things his way. That's the problem. Coaches be big-headed more than the players.
which I think is extremely toxic from a coaching standpoint, and given the Commanders' offense, as bad as it was last year at times, still finished 22nd in both points and yards per game. So if that was the bottoming out for the Washington offense last year, I would be surprised if they can't get back into the upper half of scoring and yards in 2026. And I know recently I have expressed my concerns with the Commanders' skill position players on offense, specifically at running back and receiver outside of Terry McLaurin, and I do still have concerns, but I still think they can improve this year compared to last year, but I also think they're going to have a ceiling with this offense too. I really like the players they brought in on defense this offseason, as they brought in guys in free agency like Odafe Oweh, Caleb Von Chason, Tim Settle, Nick Cross, and Amik Robertson, and also brought in Sonny Styles and Joshua Josephs from the draft. And again, I'll say this, I would be shocked if Washington doesn't improve on both sides of the football. I will be the first to say you can do this with every team, but the Commanders lost by a combined 5 points to the Bears, Dolphins, and Broncos last year, and Marcus Mariota started 2 of those games. And the point of bringing this up is this team finished with 5 wins last year, and we're 5 points away from being an 8-win team.
That's true.
While I did expect a regression from 2024 to 2025, for as bad as 2025 was for Washington, speaking strictly from how seemingly nothing went their way, yes, they had a few genuinely terrible games, but they also weren't that far off from being an 8-win team. And
that is very true. They really weren't too far from being a good team. I really put the blame on their defense because their offense was playing average. Like, okay, they were playing good enough to win games, I personally feel like, but their defense was just so same thing with the Cowboys. Offense was on a tear, but their defense is so damn bad. It's like, what can you really do? Like, there's only so much you can do on offense before your defense has to do something to stand up. If they don't stand up, it's going to get nasty. It's going to get really bad really fast.
Whenever they lose in the postseason, or whenever they get eliminated from the playoffs prior to the postseason beginning, is because they enter each year with expectations. They are not cellar dwellers of a division. They are not a consistent 4 or 5 win team. And it's because their fan base, and probably more loud parts of the fan base, enter each year expecting to win a Super Bowl. Now, as we know, Dallas has not been to the Super Bowl in a very long time, but again, it's not like they are a consistent 4 or 5 win team that's regularly selecting in the top 5 of the NFL draft. And why I think 2026 will be a much different year for the Cowboys than 2025 is because this team still put up over 470 points last year, which was good for 7th in the NFL, and we've discussed this on the channel before, but they had one of the worst defenses of all time last year. So
literally,
even if they have the 25th or 26th ranked defense in 2026, which, by the way, I certainly do think is feasible for the players they have on this roster, you would have to think, kind of due to deductive reasoning, that they're almost going to improve really by default, and that's where I think the Cowboys are entering 2026.
This is
and
true.
When you look at some of the raw statistics they had last year, they allowed over 500 points, they allowed over 6,400 yards of offense, they allowed an average of over 6 yards per play, and when you sit back and actually think about that,
there's going to be a lot of moving pieces on that defense because the offense is set. That's why you got to admire teams like the Cowboys, teams like the Eagles, because they keep the ball rolling at all times. Even the 49ers keep the ball rolling because they're going to keep improving on what they need to improve on ASAP. Because, see, the problem with teams like, let's say, for example, the Bears, when we first got Justin Fields, we had a lot of needs. We didn't just need quarterback. Quarterback was just the most important need. And then we still had to take care of other things, and we took care of the other things and realized the quarterback wasn't hitting it anymore. Then you have to get a new QB and fix everything else around him. And then now we got to the point where we can settle and be like, all right, we got the defense kind of sold up. The offense is good where we need to be. I mean, we can focus on defense, offense. But that takes time. And a lot of teams don't have time. Like the Raiders just got around that hump. They just like next year they can focus on the defense type shit probably.
That in May of the following year and sit back and really wonder, okay, it's 1st and 10. We have the opposing offense on the field, and based on the law of averages, at minimum, they are going to have 2nd and 4 after this first play, which is degrading after you go through that through a 17-game season. They also allowed 24 rushing touchdowns last year, which was 31st in the NFL, and opposing quarterbacks threw 35 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And they did intercept Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy, so 16.6% of their interceptions came on a batted ball that J.J. McCarthy threw on one of the first plays of the game on Sunday night. That was 1/6 of the entire interception total they had over a 17-game season last year.
That's bad.
They also only forced 12 turnovers in 17 games. And like
that guy
said, gave up
sucks.
over 500 points. So, believe it or not, I don't think that they're going to have back-to-back seasons where they only force 12 turnovers in 17 games, and while also allowing over 500 points on the year in the process. So, due in large part to all of this, I think the Cowboys are kind of going to improve by default, and this was, again, in a year with a first-year head coach, and they still won 7 games. The Cowboys' offense was
with a
good
horrible defense. Shout out Matt. Was that Matt Eberflus? No, it wasn't Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus sucks too. Yeah, everybody that was the head coach for the Bears before we got Ben Johnson, they never need to be hired again in a professional setting. They suck balls. Be honest about that. Not good. We're not gonna act like they're good. They're pretty fucking trash, bro. You were the head coach of the Bears before we got Caleb. I mean, after we got Caleb. Before, you know what I'm trying to say. God damn it. Shit.
Against the Chargers, which was Dart's first start. And there is a much longer conversation to be had about Dart, but I do like Jackson Dart and think he'll be fine long term. He didn't play the best against the Chargers last year, and certainly didn't look good against the Vikings either, but those were against a Jesse Minter defense in his first start, and against a Brian Flores defense later in the year without his best receiver. Some of the pushback I hear with Dart, especially for the non-Jackson Dart believers, is that he was the third best quarterback on the field that day in a game that featured Dart, J.J. McCarthy, and Max Brosmer. But Dart had high highs too, and going out to Denver to put up 32 points against that defense last year in his 4th career start, to me is incredibly impressive. And the biggest question I have with him at this point is health, because of how reckless he plays, and I do think that needs to be reeled in a bit in 2026. But the Giants also brought in several players in free agency to improve the roster, like Isaiah Likely, Jermaine Illuminor, and Tremaine Edmonds, to name a few. They also had a really good draft, as in the first 2 rounds of the 2026 draft, they selected Arvell Reese, Francis Mauigoa, and Colton Hood. We've discussed the impact of losing a player like Dexter Lawrence, and obviously that's huge, no pun intended, but they signed DJ Reader in free agency to try and fill the gap for at least the 2026 season. We also included the Giants as one of the biggest winners of the 2026 offseason video, which will be linked at the end.
They still get Cam Scatterboo back. I ain't gonna lie, we'll be in a pretty good position now that I think about it. Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterboo. They gave up Rondale, but they still got Malik Neighbors. And then on the defensive side, they got some demons on their side. I'm not gonna lie to you. They can actually make a run for it. I don't know. It depends on Jackson Dart. I don't know if Jackson Dart's gonna be good enough to like get number 1 or number 2. But he can go on a little unicorn magical run and make it happen, depending on how good the Cowboys' defense is. We can see though. I can see some chances and some operations. The Giants shocking some. Let's leave it at that. But let me know what your predictions is for the NFC East. Let me know what you